Okay, children, this is your host and host Vishnu Verma. Last time I began with the chapter class 9th Kaveri, How I Taught My Grandmother, written by Sudha Murthy, one of the renowned philanthropists, writers, and social workers of India. In the story, till we have studied that Sudha Murthy was a girl of 12 years of age, and her grandmother, whom she used to call Avva, she could not read and write. And in those days, there used to appear there used to come one magazine, weekly magazine or newspaper, which was called Karamvira, in which there used to be published one episode, means one story, episode by episode, that was called Kashi Yatra, which was very much fascinating and interesting to the grandmother of the author Sudha Murthy, because she associated herself with the story. In the story, the protagonist, the old lady, wanted to do Kashi Yatra, and she has gathered money for that to get the ultimate punya, to do the highest deed of karma. But at the same time, there was to be one girl who was an orphan, and she wanted to marry somebody, but there was a short of money. So the grandmother donated all her money which she has accumulated or gathered for Kashi Yatra, and considered it as an ultimate punya to help the needy and poor girl. That is the most important part. So once when the narrator goes to attend the marriage in the village for a week, then as usual, means the Karamvira magazine used to come, and the another part of the story was published in that. But being illiterate, she could not read and write, and she felt very desperate. And when the narrator comes, she cried in front of her, and she was full of regret, and she took a pledge to learn to read and write and to become self-dependent. And this is how the story progresses. Till now, we have studied that the story Kashi Yatra dealt with the complex psychological problems in the lives of the ordinary people, and were always very interesting. So the story Kashi Yatra, which used to publish in the magazine, weekly magazine Karamvira, was related to the day-to-day struggles of a common man or a common person, which was very interesting to the old lady, the grandmother of the narrator. Now we'll proceed from here further. हम लोग आगे बढ़ेंगे यहाँ से. Unfortunately, I told you the meaning also last time. Unfortunately, unfortunately means unluckily. One thing more I told you, that this story Kashi Yatra was written by one of the prominent authors or writers of that time in Kannada literature, that was Tribeni. She was very famous writer, and she died at a young age. So that's why it's written. Unfortunately for Kannada literature, she here refers to Tribeni. died very young. Even now, after 40 years, people continue to appreciate her novels. Even after 40 years of her death, people like her work, her novels, which was written by her at that time. One of her novels, called Kashi Yatre, was appearing as a serial. Serial, I told you, serial means in parts, in parts or episodes. In those days, television was not prevalent in India. That's why the written literature was most focused upon. So, the story of Kashi Yatra used to be published in serial form, in episode form, in the magazine Karamveera, in the Kannada weekly Karamveera. Then, it is a story of an old lady and her ardent desire. Ardent desire means strong desire. Or you can say very strong desire. So, it was a very strong desire of that old lady to go to Kashi or Varanasi. Varanasi, Kashi is the old name of Varanasi, which is a city, religious city in the Uttar Pradesh state of India. Most Hindus believe, still they believe that going to Kashi and worshipping Lord Vishweshwara. Lord Vishweshwara is one of the forms of Shiva, Lord Shiva. That is Kashi Vishwanath. So, people believe that worshipping Lord Vishweshwara is the ultimate punya. Ultimate punya means deed of high merit, the highest karma, performing highest karma. बहुत अच्छा काम करना, high level का, spiritual work. This old lady also believed in this. What she believed in this? She also believed that going to Kashi and worshipping Lord Visheshwara is an ultimate truth. And her struggle to go there was described in that novel. And how she managed, how she struggled, she strived hard to go to Kashi Vishweshwara, Lord Vishweshwara temple in Kashi. That had been described in that novel Kashi Yatre, which was published in the magazine, sorry, in our Kannada weekly Karamveera. In the story, there was also a young orphan girl. Orphan means, you must be knowing, it's a very common word, without parents. Without parents. So there were two characters in the story, the Kashi Yatra, that novel. One was the old lady who struggled to go to Kashi to uh, worship Lord Vishweshwara, and the other character was an orphan girl who falls in love, but there was no money for the wedding. So she falls in love, but she wanted to marry somebody, but there was no money with her to marry. In the end, the old lady gives away all her savings without going to Kashi. And at last, what happens? This old lady who struggled hard and gathered some money, कुछ पैसा इकट्ठा किया था, in order to go to Kashi to worship Lord Vishweshwara, to get ultimate punya, to get the highest deed done. But when she saw that the girl who was an orphan and she had no money to marry, so what she decided, she gives away all her savings, whatever money she had gathered for going to Kashi. She gives her all money to this orphan girl without going to Kashi. She says, and at last, what did that old lady say? क्या कहती है वो? The happiness of this orphan girl is more important than worshipping Lord Vishweshwara at Kashi. She says that the happiness, to bring happiness to the life of that poor needy orphan girl, was more important than going to Kashi. That was the ultimate punya. Means it gives a message that helping the poor and needy around you brings the ultimate truth than worshipping any god. God does not say to come to me and to worship and to sacrifice everything. Instead of that, you look the people around you who are needy and poor and help them out if you can. And that makes God also very happy. So this, she realized, that old lady, she realized this, and she gives her all her money to that orphan girl to get married, and realized that this was an ultimate पुण्य rather than going to काशी. काशी जाने की जगह इस लड़की की मदद कर दी जाए और यही सबसे बड़ा पुण्य होगा, highest deed होगी. Okay, children, hope you understood this much. Now I'll proceed further. My grandmother Kristika, Kristaka. Now the name of the grandmother appears first time over here. Kristaka was the name of the grandmother of the author Sudha Murthy. As I told you earlier also, the story has been written in first person. So Sudha Murthy की grandmother का नाम कृष्टका था. So कहती हैं, she says, my grandmother Kristaka never went to school. She was an illiterate lady. She never went to school. कभी school नहीं गई थी वो. So she could not read. इसीलिए वो पढ़ नहीं सकती थी. This is very important. A question could be asked that why the grandmother could not read? Because she never went to school. Formal schooling was not done. Every Wednesday, the magazine would come and I would read the next episode of this story to her. So every week on Wednesday, the magazine Karan Veera used to come, weekly magazine, with a new episode published in it, new episode of Kashi Yatra published in it, and Sudha Murthy, the narrator who was 12 years of age at that time, जो 12 साल की होती उस समय, she reads the next part of the story, Kashi Yatra, to her grandmother. And the grandmother used to listen to it in a very interesting manner. During that time, she would forget all her work and listen with the greatest concentration. Concentration means focus of full attention. So the grandmother used to listen the story narrated by the author to her in a very focused manner with full greatest concentration, and she used to forget everything at that time. Her entire focus was in listening to the story of Kashi Yatra. Later, she could repeat the entire text by heart. Means she used to hear the story, listen to the story with so much dedication that after that she was able to recite or repeat the story by heart. इतने फोकस तरीके से सुनती थी, इतना ध्यान लगा के सुनती थी स्टोरी उसकी ग्रैंडमदर कि बाद में उस स्टोरी को जितना सुना था उन्होंने उतना word by word she used to recite by herself. My grandmother too never went to Kashi. Acha, one thing more. The narrator's grandmother, Kristaka, she also never went to Kashi. Means she must be wanting to go there. And she identified herself with the novel's protagonist. Now two new words have come. Identified herself. Identified means related herself. Identified means related. The grandmother also related herself, associated herself with the protagonist of the काशी यात्रा, that old lady. तो ग्रैंड मदर अपने आप को उस काशी यात्रा की जो ओल्ड लेडी होती है उससे रिलेट कर लेती है. शी कंसिडर हरसेल्फ एज वन ऑफ द कैरेक्टर्स ऑफ द काशी यात्रा, उससे जोड़ लेती है. दैट्स व्हाई द स्टोरी बिकम्स मोर इंटरेस्टिंग टू हर. अब क्या होता है प्रोटैगनिस्ट. प्रोटैगनिस्ट मीन्स मेन कैरेक्टर ऑफ द स्टोरी. किसी भी कहानी का मुख्य किरदार जो होता है, द पर्सन, द लीडिंग कैरेक्टर अराउंड whom the entire story revolves, जिसके इर्द गिर्द पूरी कहानी घूमती है, दैट इज द मेन कैरेक्टर. सो द ग्रैंडमदर relates herself, associate herself, the writer's grandmother associates herself with the old lady, the protagonist in the novel Kashi Yatra. So more than anybody else, she was one most interested in knowing what happened next in the story and used to insist that I read the serial out to her. So since she related herself to the protagonist of the novel, that's why the grandmother of the author was most interested, highly interested in knowing what happened next in the episode. That's why she used to insist her granddaughter Sudhamurti to read the next episode so that she would come to know that what had happened next in the story Kashi Yatra. And then Sudhamurti used to read out that to her, particular part of the story to her grandmother. After hearing what happened next in Kashi Yatra, she would join her friends at the temple courtyard. Now, another word has come, courtyard. What is courtyard? जिसको हम हिंदी में बरामदा कहते हैं. Courtyard means an open area, area surrounded by walls. खुला area, open area, which is surrounded by, enclosed by walls from all four sides. That's called baranda, courtyard. So after listening to the latest part of the story of the Kashi Yatra, the grandmother used to go to temple's courtyard. She used to go to temple's courtyard, temple के बरामदे में जाती थी, and she used to discuss that part with her friends. Join her friends at the temple courtyard, where we children would also gather to play hide and seek. And since the author was only 12 years of age, so while the grandmother was busy in discussing the latest episode of Karnveera with her friends, the author was busy playing hide and seek with her friends over there. See, there's a picture also where grandmother could be seen discussing the story of Kashi Yatra published in Karamveera magazine. She's seen discussing the story with her friends in the temple's courtyard. She would discuss the latest episode with her friends. As I've told you, latest episode, whatever latest episode was there, which was uh, read aloud by the narrator to her grandmother. After listening to that, she used to visit the temple's courtyard and discuss that latest episode with her friends. Latest means new or current. At that time, I never understood why there was so much of debate. Debate. Debate means discussion. Debate means discussion. किसी बात पे discussion होना. So the writer says, at that time, I never understood why there was so much of debate about the story. So the author never understood that why there was so much of discussion over that story. उस कहानी के ऊपर the discussion क्यों होता था? क्या reason था? Because she was 12 years of age only, and she was unable to understand about the worldly affairs, दुनिया की बातें समझने में उसको दिक्कत आ उतनी उतनी बुद्धि नहीं थी. She was only 12 years of age, so she was unable to understand the worldly affairs, दुनियादारी समझने में सक्षम नहीं थी कैसे, not able enough. So she was surprised that why there was so much discussion over the story. Why? Because that story was related to the everyday struggle of a common person. Once I went for a wedding with my cousins to the neighboring village. Now the new twist appears over here. कहानी में नया ट्विस्ट यहाँ पे आता है, नया मोड़ जिसे कहते हैं. कि एक बार क्या होता है कि नरेटर जो होती है सुधा मूर्ति, she goes to attend the wedding with her cousins in a nearby village. In those days, a wedding was a great event. In those days, wedding was a great event. बड़ा celebration होता था. Even today also marriage is a great event in anybody's family. We children enjoyed ourselves thoroughly. Thoroughly means completely. Thoroughly means completely. So the narrator, as usual, she was 12 years of age. Even today also, in any marriage party or any celebration, the children are the ones who enjoy the most. बच्चे ही सब ज़रा enjoy करते हैं. Like that time also and today also, they need new clothes, new things they get to eat, new friends they meet, and many other things they do. There is a great enjoyment for them. So similarly, writer also enjoyed a lot. We would eat and play endlessly. They would eat, खा वो लोग खाते थे यार, just play, savoring the freedom, savoring the freedom because all the elders were busy. So they had the freedom because the children had the freedom. Nobody was to check them at that time. Usually what happens, क्या होता है कि when we do anything, usually there is a check on us. हमारे पास check रहता है. Mean mother and father and grandparents and elder people in the family, they pinpoint on us. हमें रोकते हैं, टोकते हैं. Now enough, बहुत खेल लिया. Come on, go get back to study. पढ़ाई करो. In the same way, that was done at that time also. And in olden days, it was more prevalent. ज़्यादा होता था. So the writer says that during that even marriage time, everybody was busy. All the elders were busy in getting the ceremony organized in a proper manner, जिससे कि वो चीजें अच्छे से हो जाएं. And that's why these children had the freedom to play, eat, and enjoy endlessly without any check, without anybody to stop them. I went for a couple of days. Couple means two days, but ended up staying there for a week. She only went for a couple of days, 2 days, but anyhow she had to stay over there for a week. And she forgot that that new episode of Kashi Yatra must be coming, and she had to read the story because she was unable to realize uh, about her grandmother's likeness of that story, the fondness about the story. She did not understand that how much her grandmother was fond of that story and who was going to read it for her, and how desperate she would become in her absence if there would be nobody to read the story for her. उसको ये चीज़ का एहसास नहीं हुआ राइटर को कि ग्रैंडमदर कितनी परेशान हो जाएंगी अगर कोई इनके लिए वो कहानी को नहीं पढ़ेगा. When I came back to my village, I saw my grandmother in tears. Now when she returned to her village, she found that the grandmother was in tears. She was crying. There were tears in her eyes. And I told you earlier in the summary that grandmother was a very strong-willed lady. बहुत strong will की महिला थी वो. लेकिन first time the writer had seen her tears in her eyes. I was surprised, for I had never seen her cry even in the most difficult situations. तो narrator बोलती है कि that she was surprised. चौंक गई वो, surprise हो गई. She was surprised because she had never seen her grandmother crying even in the toughest situations, even in the most problematic situations. कितनी भी प्रॉब्लम वाली सिचुएशन हो, कभी भी उन्होंने अपने ग्रैंडमदर को रोते हुए नहीं देखा था. But the first time she saw her grandmother crying, she saw tears in her eyes. What had happened? She was worried. I was worried. Avva. Avva, she used to call her grandmother as Avva. Avva, is everything all right? Are you okay? She put the direct question to her that Avva, are you all right? Everything is okay with you? I used to call her Avva, which means mother in the Kannada, spoken in North Karnataka. So in the Kannada language, Avva means mother. In the beginning only I told you that she was brought up by her grandmother. That's why she used to call her Abba, which means mother in Kannada language. So she was very much worried. Now, I'll move on to the next part of the story. She nodded. Nodded means shook her head. Nodded means shook her head. अपना सर हिलाया. But did not reply. I did not understand and forgot about it. And the author also did not understand that what had happened, because the grandmother did not reply anything, and then she forgot about it. Because she was not much mature, only 12 years of age she was. In the night, after dinner, we were sleeping in the open terrace. Open terrace means at the top of the house, means on the roof. Open surface at the top of the house. In villages, even today also, people used to sleep at the top of the house on the roof. Open surface, open terrace, open roof space. It was a summer night and there was a full moon. It was a bright night. Full moon was there in the sky. Avva came and sat next to me. Avva comes and sits near to the narrator. Her affectionate hands. Affectionate. Now tell me, what is the meaning of affectionate? Affectionate means, I am writing here, showing love and care. Love and care. Because the grandmother also loved her granddaughter. Her affectionate hands touched my forehead. So the grandmother put her hand on the forehead of the narrator. I realized she wanted to speak. I asked her, "What is the matter?" So the narrator at once realized that grandmother wanted to say something to her, and then at once she asked her, पूछती है अपनी grandmother से, "What is the matter? क्या बात है बताओ?" Now from here the grandmother starts narrating her life story and her pain, what had happened to. So the grandmother starts narrating her life story and her pain to the narrator, that is her 12-year-old granddaughter Sudha Murthy. क्या बताती हूँ उनसे? When I was a young girl, grandmother बता रही है, grandmother is telling her story. When I was a young girl, I lost my mother. उनकी mother की death हो जाती, she lost her mother. There was nobody to look after and guide me. So there was nobody to look after means to take care. Look after मतलब होता है take care and guide me. उनको guide करने वाला कोई नहीं था. My father was a busy man and got married again. And her father means grandmother's father was a busy man and he got married again. He did not had any care about her, about his daughter. In those days, people never considered education essential for girls. This is also important point. People never consider education essential for girls. ये भी बड़ा important point है. This is also a very, very important point, that why she was left uneducated. Because in those days, people considered that education was not important for girls. दो point मिल गया. Her father was a busy man and he got married. He did not pay much attention on his daughter, and above all, in those days, girls were not educated. People never considered it important to educate the girls. Essential means important. Essential means important. So I never went to school, and that's why the grandmother never went to school. She tells her granddaughter Sudha Murthy the story behind not attending the school, behind being illiterate. Later, I had grandchildren. Sorry. So I never went to school. I got married very young and had children. अब वो बताती है further she goes that she was married at a very young age and then she had children. I became very busy and she became very busy in raising up their children. अपने बच्चों को बड़ा करने में लग गई as a housewife. Later I had grandchildren. अब उनके बाद में grandchildren भी हो गए, नाती पोते जिन्हें कहते हैं हम, and Sudha Murthy was one of them, and always felt so much happiness in cooking and feeding. Feeding means serving food. Serving food. So the grandmother got married at an early age, then she had children, then grandchildren, and she became extremely busy, and she says that she felt happy in that business. She felt happy in taking care of her children and grandchildren. She liked cooking and feeding them. Or feeding all of you means Sudha Murthy and other children. At times, I used to regret. Regret. Regret means these are good words. You should know the meaning of it. Feeling sorry. Feeling sorry. Sorry feel करना. Why? So she used to feel sorry. For what? Not going to school. So at that time, she used to regret for not going to school. That's why she did not go to school. So I made sure that my children and grandchildren studied well. So the grandmother took a pledge. उन्होंने एक बात पे ध्यान दिया that कुछ भी हो जाए उनके बच्चे और उनके grandchildren, her children and grandchildren would study well. वो पढ़ाई करेंगे पूरी अपनी. So hmm, now here one second. Here there are certain questions which has been put to check your understanding of the story till now. Complete the cause and effect table given uh, below based on part 1 of the story. Part 1 of the story is complete. That she, grandmother decides that her children and grandchildren would study well. So till here on Miss till this part of the story, there are certain questions based on it. Let us do it. This is cause and this is effect. Means they like here see effect. Uska asar. It is given over here. The morning papers arrived late in the day and weekly magazines would come one day later. Wow, one day late. ऐसा क्यों होता है? उसका क्या कॉज था, क्या रीजन? रीजन उसका असर. पहले से कर लेते हैं. विल डू इट फर्स्ट. व्हाई? क्यों ऐसा होता है? मॉर्निंग पेपर देर में क्यों आते थे और वीकली मैगजीन एक दिन लेट क्यों आती थी? Why? It is because the transport system was not very good. It is because the transport system was not very good. That's why the morning papers and magazines arrived late. Now here cause is given. The grandmother Kristika never went to school. क्यों वो स्कूल नहीं गई? Now we have to give the reason, effect. उसका असर क्या हुआ? उसका असर क्या हुआ? सॉरी, उसका इफेक्ट क्या हुआ? वो स्कूल नहीं गई तो क्या हुआ? अरे यार, she could not read and write. ओके बच्चों, उसका असर क्या हुआ कि वो लिख और पढ़ नहीं सकती थी. नेक्स्ट, I hope you are doing all this because this will be asked in exams. She now here effect is given. असर दिया हुआ, क्या उसका इफेक्ट हुआ? She was deeply interested in the story and discussed it with the friends. वो बहुत इंटरेस्टेड थी स्टोरी में. Why? क्यों? Because the grandmother identified herself. Sorry. Identified herself with Mhm. old lady in the story. The grandmother related herself with the old lady in the story. Now, cause the narrator went to a wedding for a week. What is the effect of that? What happened? The grandmother was desperate, was desperate हो जाती है as there was nobody to read the next episode of the story for her. क्योंकि उनके पास स्टोरी का अगला एपिसोड पढ़ने के लिए कोई नहीं था, इसलिए वो उदास हो जाती है. नाउ इफेक्ट. द ग्रैंडमदर नेवर वेंट टू स्कूल. व्हाई? द ग्रैंडमदर नेवर वेंट टू स्कूल. व्हाई? राइट नाउ आई टॉट यू. Because education was not considered essential for girls in those days. In those days. Next, the grandmother regretted not going to school. Grandmother बोला regret का मतलब पछतावा होना. She regretted not going to school. और उसका क्या effect हुआ? What was the effect? She made sure that her children and grandchildren studied well. She made sure that her children and grandchildren studied well. उन्होंने इंश्योर किया कि उनके बच्चे और उनके ग्रैंड चिल्ड्रन अच्छे से पढ़ाई करेंगे. Now one more question is there. Do you think the narrator expected to see her grandmother in tears when she returned to the village? क्या grandmother उसने narrator सोचा था कि वो जब लौटेगी तो उसकी grandmother रो रही होंगी? No, no is the answer. She never expected her grandmother to be in tears. No. If no, why not? Why? Because why? Because the narrator did not realize that the grandmother had closely related herself to the protagonist of the story and was very fond of it. She was very fond of the story and she had closely related herself to the protagonist. This, the granddaughter Sudhamurti did not realize, that's why she stayed in the village. How might the narrator help her grandmother to fulfill her desire to learn to read and write? How might? Means how could she help? So, she might have helped her grandmother by teaching her Kannada alphabet to read and write. Okay. So this is for today. We have done enough. In our next episode, in our next part, we'll proceed further with the story. So now I'm signing off. Till then, bye. And I hope that you understood the story and will study well to upgrade yourself. Thank you. That's for the day. हेलो आइए लैंग्वेज लगाना है अभी तो कुछ नहीं किया कर दे अच्छा क्या ही है